When I was a kid, my favorite person in the world was my uncle. He was the youngest in the family, barely out of high school when I was around 10 or 11. To me, he was larger than life. He wasn't some distant adult who only showed up on holidays. He was still young enough to understand what I thought was cool, and he made time for me. Every spring break and summer, we'd visit. I'd practically count down the days because I knew I'd get to hang out with him. He'd let me sit in his room while he played records and tapes. He was the one who introduced me to bands I probably wouldn't have discovered until much later in life. I'd watch him put a record on the turntable, and it felt like some kind of ritual. That's how much I looked up to him. Those were some of the best memories of my childhood. Like everything, though, it changed. I hit my teenage years and started caring more about my own friends, my own life. We stopped making those trips as often. Eventually, they stopped altogether. I graduated high school, he started a family, had responsibilities. The distance just grew naturally. It wasn't because of anything bad. It just happened as life went on. A few years later, my mom called me and told me my uncle had passed away. I hadn't seen him in years at that point. When I asked what happened, all she said was that he was sick. That was all anyone in the family seemed willing to say. It wasn't until much later that I found out the truth. He had taken his own life. He didn't leave a note, no explanation. From what I gathered later, people assumed he got news about his health and decided he didn't want to go through what was coming. That was the story that made the rounds anyway. After the funeral, I started dreaming about him. Now, I should say, I've always been a vivid dreamer. Not the type where I control what happens, but the kind where I can wake up and remember every detail. That's how clear they are. So when these dreams started, I didn't think much of it at first. The first ones were almost comforting, just me and him in his old room again, music playing, us cracking jokes. It felt like slipping back into childhood for a night, but they didn't stay like that. The dreams began to shift, and they got stranger. One night I dreamed we were in a movie theater. The two of us were sitting in the very front row, so close to the screen that it was almost painful to look up at it. Something was playing, but I couldn't tell what it was. The images were blurry, almost scrambled, like a TV with bad reception. My uncle was sitting next to me, talking constantly, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't understand a single word he said. It was like his mouth was moving and the sound was there, but it was distorted and muffled, like it was underwater. Another dream put us in a hallway lined with doors, dozens of them. He walked up to each one and tried the handle, but every single one was locked. He kept glancing back at me like I should be able to help, but I had no key. There was no way to open any of them. The most unsettling dream, and the one that repeated the most, was about a rope bridge. My uncle would be sitting at the edge of it, staring at the planks stretched out over a dark canyon. The bridge looked old, barely held together. Every time he tried to step onto it, snakes would appear. Dozens of them, coiled up on the planks, striking at him whenever he moved forward. He'd retreat back to where he started, sit down again, and just look at me. At first I would just stand there, unsure of what to do, but eventually I started stepping out on the bridge myself. The snakes were aggressive, snapping at me as I moved forward. I realized if I jumped up and down hard enough, the whole bridge would shake. The snakes hated it. They'd thrash and then slide off into the darkness below. So I'd grab my uncle's hand and lead him onto the bridge. He was always hesitant, scared to move, but eventually he'd follow behind me. I'd bounce the bridge, snakes would fall, and he'd step forward a little more. It always ended the same way. We'd get close to the end, and he would finally make it across. He'd turn around and look at me, sometimes even smile, and then keep walking into the distance. I never crossed with him. I always stopped at the edge watching him go, and then I'd wake up. And every time I woke up with this deep, crushing sadness. That bridge dream happened over and over for nearly 20 years. Sometimes other dreams would show up, but that one was the anchor. I never told anyone in my family about it. How could I? Quietly, I just accepted that maybe he was haunting me in some way. Then a few years ago, my grandmother passed away. It wasn't tragic. She was older, got pneumonia, and never recovered. One night, she just didn't wake up. The family came together, we mourned, and we celebrated her life. And after her funeral, the dreams stopped. I think about it a lot. Part of me believes my grandmother found him on her way out, like she saw her youngest son lost somewhere between here and whatever comes next, picked him up, brushed him off, and finally took him home. Another part of me thinks maybe her death gave me the closure I needed, the permission to let him go. I don't know which one it is. Maybe both. But I do know this. After 20 years of strange dreams, of locked doors and muffled words and snakes on a bridge, it felt like someone finally came to get him. I look back on it now, and I like to think that my uncle was just lost. He was lost in life, and that carried on in death. But in the end, he wasn't lost forever. I like to think he finally made it home. While I was deployed in Kosovo, my team did a lot of night missions that required us to cover a great deal of ground in a short period of time in order to make our extractions, all of it while remaining undetected by anyone in the areas that we would pass through. We would always seem to see odd things during the night, but nothing like this. During one of our recon missions, we had started by getting dropped off in a remote location to identify whether shipments of mortar rounds and mines were being moved through the area. Our extract was going to be before daybreak, and we needed to make it just over 10 miles. The terrain wasn't too overgrown, and we had good intel over the area, and it was either a full moon or close to it. So unless we encountered somebody, this was going to be an easy night. Our team was normally only 4 men, but we had the opportunity to make this a good training run for some of the new guys, and we took on an extra 3. We still wanted to make sure we played it safe though, so I took rear security and Adam took the position just in front of me. We both worked great together and could easily manage to cover our team if needed. We moved about 6 miles through our mission area without finding anything, and had made good time doing it. At this point, we needed to start heading for our extraction point, which was located over a good-sized hill and then through an area that was near a village, but it wasn't too close. We regrouped, did a count of people, ammo and supplies, and moved out. Being rear security, I was the last to move, and just as I was about to take off, I heard a noise in the trees maybe 160 feet off. I turned and saw Adam looking at the direction as well. He had heard it too. Everyone else was still moving, since the new guys were in the middle and were not used to looking back every 60 feet to spot your security. We were getting left. Chances were that the noise was nothing more than a deer, but Adam and I started moving out, using a 2-man bounding technique. We kept hearing a noise, so I told Adam to reach the team, while I remained in place after our next bound. I found a place with cover, and he bolted after the team. I heard the noise again, and then saw trees move about 50 feet in front of me. Everything stopped. 2 minutes went by with me being very quiet, controlling my breathing, and watching my front and sides. Adam and my team were slowly making their way to engage whatever had been following us. They came up on the sides and surrounded the area I signaled to. Once in position, I moved up. Nothing. Not footprints, tracks, or any sign that something had been there. Cue the guys giving Adam and I a hard time for getting left alone and scared. We move out again. I am the last to move, with Adam between myself and the next man to the front. This time, no noises when I step away. After about 2 miles, we come up to an orchard that we need to move through. The light from the moon was really bright and the trees were spaced, so we used them for cover as we stayed near the middle of the orchard. Just before I enter, I hear the noise again. This time, I thought I heard a little girl giggling. Not something that my imagination would make up on its own. I was expecting wildlife, if anything. This time, Adam had taken off an additional 60 feet and turned to wait for me. I moved to my location and he moved out again. I was crouched next to a tree watching for anything. All of a sudden, the tree I was next to caught my attention. In the knots on the tree, I could see a face that looked like a person. As I squinted and looked more closely, a little girl's face appears and she turns at me, smiling, waving a little hand and giggles, then disappears back into the tree. I am in absolute shock at this point, and there is not a chance in hell that I am going back to my team to report what I just saw. So instead, I bolt and catch up to Adam and keep my mouth shut. Recognizing that I likely have lost my mind, I am not going to talk about anything. We hit our extract and leave. 2 weeks go by, and I am told that I am needed to provide security for a team of combat engineers who are going through an area I am familiar with. In the meantime, my team was going to be going through the area we were in 2 weeks ago, where Adam and I got scared. Again, I never said a word to anyone about what I saw. In my mind, I am quite happy about not going back there. So, I go out with the engineers and help them find a minefield that had been recently laid, and they take care of informing the village nearby. I get back and am taken to see my commander and told thanks for the work. Feeling great, I head back to my barracks room and see that none of the guys are back yet. No sooner than taking my boots off, the door opens and I hear everyone laughing as they enter. Adam is not laughing and telling everyone to screw themselves. One of the other guys sees me and tells me Adam says he isn't going on patrol with them anymore in my favorite spot. I just grimace and wait for stuff to calm down. A couple of days later, Adam and I are out playing babysitter to some scouts. He says, "What did you see that night?" I shrug and say, "I don't know. Just my imagination getting the better of me." He then says something that sends chills up my spine. "I know you saw her. I saw her too. Tell me I am not crazy." I felt numb and just said, "You're not crazy. Where did you see her?" He said, "Inside a tree." I had never given any information to Adam about what I saw, or details that could have led for him to come up with the same conclusion. When I saw the girl in the tree, Adam was 130 feet away from my location and could not have even seen me looking at the tree. Adam's words hit me harder than anything in that deployment. We never shared details, but we both knew what we saw. From then on, we refused patrols near that orchard. My mom has never been one to tell ghost stories. She's practical, blunt, and no nonsense. If something creaks in the house, she'll tell you it's the plumbing or the wind. She's got a little spiritual side, like she'll say the occasional thing about fate or karma, but she's never been someone obsessed with the paranormal. So when she told me this story, I believed her. When she retired, she threw herself into family history. She tracked down old letters, photographs, anything she could find. At some point, she got hold of a diary that had belonged to my dad's mother, Nan. Nan had died maybe 20 years earlier. I barely remember her, but the way everyone describes her is the same. Very formal, very proper. She called people dear and would describe things as terribly unfortunate or perfectly dreadful. She was polite, but in this sharp, slightly cold way, like she was always a little offended. And she was extremely private. She didn't like people knowing her business. So the fact that her diary even survived and ended up in my mom's hands was strange. One night my dad was away and my mom was home alone. She decided to finally sit down and read it. She made herself tea, settled in the living room, and opened the diary. At first the weather was normal. Then it started raining. No big deal, it rains a lot on the coast. She got up, closed a couple of windows, and went back to reading. The entries were typical Nan, short, clipped notes about the day, little comments, and not much warmth. After about 5 minutes, the rain picked up and turned into a storm. Winds started howling around the house. She went to another room to shut those windows too. She came back and sat down again. She'd been reading maybe 15 minutes total at that point. That's when the intercom to her right blasted to life at full volume. Just loud static. No voice, no words, just hissing. It made her jump out of her skin. The house was built decades ago by an electrician. It's 3 stories tall, full of wiring, switches, and power outlets on every wall, and every single room has its own intercom. After catching her breath, she reached over and turned that one off. But a second later, she realized she could still hear it. The one in the next room was still roaring. She went over and shut that one off. Then she heard it downstairs. More static coming from multiple rooms. She headed down to the middle level, which has the master unit that controls the whole system. She turned that one off and finally everything went quiet. But as she turned to go back upstairs, she noticed something that stopped her cold. The pictures on the walls were all crooked. My mom loves hanging things. Family photos, landscapes, portraits, little paintings. Every wall in that house has frames on it, and every single one was tilted at the same angle, like someone had gone through methodically and pushed them out of place. It wasn't random, like if the house had just shaken. They were all aligned. She stood there staring. Then she realized the storm outside had gotten worse. That whole floor has a long row of timber-framed windows running the length of the house, and the rain was so heavy it had soaked the tops of the glass panes, which almost never happens unless the storm is driving sideways. While she was watching, she heard it. A single gust of wind, but not like any normal wind. She described it as if a train had blasted past outside the balcony. The windows rattled one after the other in sequence, like something invisible had rushed the length of the house. Most people would have run for the door at that point. She didn't. She walked calmly back upstairs. She closed the diary. She put it inside a cupboard. She shut the door and said out loud, "Sorry, Nan." Then she walked into the kitchen and made herself another cup of tea. Within minutes, the storm eased. The windows stopped rattling. The house went still. She went back through the hallway and carefully straightened all the pictures. Then she went to bed. The next day, she ran into a guy from work who lived maybe 10 houses down on the same street. She brought up the storm, saying how wild it had been the night before. He looked at her funny. "What storm?" he asked. She thought he was joking, but he swore up and down that there hadn't been any storm at all. He said he and his wife had eaten dinner on their balcony that night. Calm weather the whole evening. Not even a sprinkle of rain. That's when it really hit her. Everything she had experienced, the intercoms, the pictures, the windows shaking, the storm pounding the glass, was just in that house. Or maybe it was just for her. She never opened the diary again. She put it away and it stayed there. To this day, she'll tell you every detail exactly the same. And she'll still say she has no explanation. And if Nan is somehow looking over our shoulders, I'll just say this: your diary will stay shut. We know how much you valued your privacy. We'll remember you as a woman who kept herself proper and carried words sharper than they sounded. If that night was you rattling the windows and shaking the house, the warning was clear. We heard you. Rest easy, Nan.